Chapter 18, The Trap. Fred woke twice in the night to find his nose pressed against the bare stones and mud of the floor and his breath coming in gasps. His father's back was turned to him, and he wouldn't look round, even though Fred screamed until his lungs were empty. "A dream," he muttered. "Dreams don't matter. Not real." But it had felt very real. Real like blood is real. He looked up through the vines to the canopy above them. He squinted, trying to memorize every inch. The second he got home, he would draw the canopy for his father in full colour. His father would buy him pencils in a dozen different greens. Fred didn't want to risk closing his eyes again. There was a powerful relief when the sun came up, and he could creep out of the stone hut into its warmth. There was a chilly lump of guilt sitting in his stomach, left over from the previous night. He had never stolen anything in his life, never even tried. He looked towards the vines, shining vivid emerald in the morning light. He thought of the look on the explorer's face. It had been more than angry. It had had fear in it. He would have to apologize. The thought made Fred's stomach squirm with humiliation, but he couldn't leave the explorer thinking he was a habitual thief, a liar, a cheat. He wasn't sure if the man was the kind to accept apologies. It might be akin to apologizing to one of the stone statues, but he would try. He tipped up his boots, checking them for scorpions. All the books he'd read had been very urgent on the matter of scorpions. Fred's fingers were clumsier than usual. His upper body was quivering with nerves. The ruin looked different in the sunrise. It looked more alive. There were places where vines had covered the half-fallen remnants of walls that ran along the far end of the square, places to where the vines had been hacked back, and he could see the marks in the stone where it had been cut from the parent rock. Fred walked slowly through the open square, staring upwards. The canopy over them was intricately constructed, woven from the branches of the trees that had sprouted among the stones and nestled against the city walls, and from a network of vines. It was a green tablecloth for a giant, laid out atop the trees. There were holes in the green scattered everywhere where the sun burst through in bright light, and one vast gap just above the statues where the stones shone yellow. Directly under it, a single tree stood, burnt of all leaves, perhaps by the sun, Fred thought, or a very small forest fire. A tiny mouse-like creature with enormous ears was basking in the heat of the morning. It scuttled away as he came near. Fred approached the stone statues, his stomach knotting tighter with every step. They were twice as tall as he was, and so worn by rain and time that their faces were smoothed of expression. The man and the woman were identifiable only by their bodies, the panther by her tail, but still in places he could see where tools had cut the stone. He reached out and touched the panther's paw. Only half of it remained, but he could see where her claws would have been, how her yellow stone would have glowed when she was new. The explorer, though, was nowhere to be seen. Fred was just about to turn tail and run when he heard deep breathing ahead of him. A tree had grown through the stone floor to the left side of the statues. The explorer was asleep in a hammock woven from lianas, in the shade of the tree. He lay in it diagonally, stretched out. In that direction it was almost as flat as a bed. Fred made a mental note to only lie in hammocks diagonally from now on. Under the hammock was a cluster of things: a small pot of ink, a quill made from a vulture feather, a piece of bark with some notes, and an enormous pair of shoes. Fred moved closer. The explorer looked much younger asleep, and softer. "Boy," the man did not open his eyes. At least he didn't seem to. "I hope you have a good reason for waking me." Fred's chest grew hot. "Sorry, he began. How did he know it was him? He must, Fred thought, have been peeping from between his eyelashes. "I could smell you," said the explorer, as if Fred had asked the question aloud. "And you all breathe differently. The English girl breathes through her teeth. The Brazilian girl with the ropes of hair breathes as though she fears waking the world. The small boy appears to be breathing through a veritable revolutionary barricade of snot. And right now, you are breathing as if you are afraid I plan to throw a knife into your kneecap." Fred flinched. but the explorer didn't seem to notice. He sighed and stretched. "It's no good. I'm awake now." "Oh, I hope you slept well," asked Fred. The explorer sat up and scratched his chin. "This isn't a rooming house in Bournemouth. You don't have to talk like an old woman." Fred felt his forehead grow hot. "I was trying to be polite. My father says, be ruthlessly polite, if only because it's easier than all the alternatives." How practical of him. The explorer extracted a red and black bee-like insect from the hem of his trouser leg and crushed it between his palms. "In future, boy, it's best not to come near me when I'm sleeping. If you need to wake me, throw something from a safe distance." "Why?" "I have a startle reflex." Fred must have looked as puzzled as he felt because the man added, "I was captured once." "By Germans?" "No." "By natives?" "Not by the people you're thinking of. Not by the indigenous people to whom this land belongs. By the owners of a rubber company. I didn't like how they were treating the people who lived in the forest around them." "Is that how your leg—" "I have very little desire to talk about it." Fred stepped backwards. "There are looks that make you want to hide behind your own back." He forced himself to speak. "I wanted to come and say, I'm really sorry. About last night." It was coming out wrong. He sounded as if he were apologizing for failing to hold open the door. He swallowed. "Properly sorry." The explorer raised a single unimpressed eyebrow. Fred began to stammer. Fear dug into his belly. It wasn't. We weren't going to do anything. We weren't going to take anything or break anything, but it was dishonest and counterproductive," said the explorer dryly. "Quite." Fred flushed. For the first time he met the explorer's eye. He nodded. "Yes, it was. I didn't mean to be one of those things, but I was. You're right to be angry." He stared at the floor as he turned away, back towards the sleeping house. "Wait." Fred turned. The explorer began to tie his shoes, meticulously tugging at the ends of the laces to get them exactly even. Then he pulled a knife from his pocket and began to sharpen the blade on a rock. Fred waited, the tension building in his chest. He wondered if the man really was planning to cut off his fingers. He thrust his hands deep in his pockets. At last the explorer said, "I'm going to set a trap." He splashed water in his face. "You might as well learn how, if you're going to provide for yourselves on your trek home." Carefully, methodically, the man began to shave with the knife. "You interested in coming?" "Yes," said Fred. "Very."